Hello. Well, today we're talking about the social rebellion, and specifically, we're talking about booze. That's right. It's now not the time to jump off this podcast just because you think you're going to clap a slap over the back of the knuckles because you drink booze. But let's face it, talking about alcohol ain't easy, and it's certainly one of those social norms that I think people find it very difficult to talk about. But today we're going there, and I've been very interested in having this conversation for quite some time. And it wasn't until a month ago that I got introduced to a lady who's got a big movement with specifically life beyond the booze, called the social rebellion, that it really, for me, made me think about being able to have the conversation with somebody who's not, just only gone there and put her whole life on, in a book about it, and she's, unpacked all of her thinking around it. And I thought this is a really perfect opportunity. But before I introduce Maz, there's a couple of things I do want to say about why I do think having this conversation is really important. And I do want you to know, like, if you're somebody who does drink, and, this is not about being right or wrong. I'm not sitting here with any judgment about anyone's, decisions about alcohol. I certainly, it's a decision that I think we make, that it's a very personal one. And at the same time, I do invite you to, just come with this, with an open mind about, your own use of alcohol, and what, because it really does come down to, I think, the conversation about our relationship with alcohol, and how healthy is that or unhealthy is it, and to make choices. Now, why am I particularly interested in this? Well, a few reasons, and I'm going to put my own life at stake here. For myself, as a mum of three kids, getting it to the end of the day, and juggling work, and, a whole lot of other stuff, I would get to the end of the day, and it would be, and sometimes I wouldn't make it actually to the end of the day. I would, be thank God for the glass of wine, and it took me some time, really, because I was a reaction to my external environment. When I'd have an argument with my husband, or I'd get stressed out with the kids, the very first thing I'd do is I'd grab a drink, and it would just take the edge off. And so it's taken me 3 years. I've had one drink in the last 6 months. So I finally feel like, no matter how stressed I get right now, the last thing I actually want is a drink, which is good news for me. But there's another couple of reasons why I'm really interested in talking about this. And one is the relationship we have with others, because actually what I discovered is giving up alcohol personally is the easy part. The hard part is the grief that comes from losing people, and the relationship that you've got, and the life that you had, that kind of just starts to disappear. And for me, I've really struggled with that one, because there have been relationships in my life very close to home that have been impacted because I just don't choose to drink, which means I don't choose to do things that other people choose to do where there's alcohol, because for myself, even though I wouldn't drink in those environments, I just don't like it anymore. So that's the other reason. And then the final reason, which I'm really in a blind spot about, is having teenagers. I had my first, here we go, here's the confession part. I had my first drop of alcohol when I was 11. And of course, then I snuck out to clubs when I was 15, and I would drink alcohol and forge my birth certificate, which back then was easy because we did it all on a piece of paper. So, uh, unbeknownst to my mother, I was drinking, and now I have a teenager, and we've had our first experience of finding him drunk. And, thankfully, I think he's a brilliant kid, and it's one of those. I'm hoping it's one of those ones off. But am I the blinker lady with? Am I the mother who's got the blinkers on? But I just want to be really authentic, because today I really have come at this just being completely open and vulnerable. I don't have anything handled. I don't have any answers. In fact, I'm right in the process of, opening myself up and contacting people to see if I can get answers. So that's kind of the backstory for those of you who are listening today. And I do think that I do know the science behind it, because I do have studied the neuroscience, and that health and alcohol specifically has a massive impact on our brain functioning, and is one of the main drivers to the barriers of resilience and hence performance. So there's a very holistic view about it. But I do want to now now introduce Maz, because Maz is, oh my goodness, there is so much great stuff to talk about. And hopefully I do her justice. So, hopefully this one does you justice, Maz. But Maz, and for those of you who are actually on the, can see the camera, I'm going to just show the book. But Maz has written a book called The Social Rebellion. And I have to say, firstly, love the title. I mean, I'm a rebel without a cause. So, firstly, I think it would just resonated a lot. But just some backstory. So the book really is about Maz's experience with having, life beyond the booze. And she's called it True Freedom Begins with a cheeky month alcohol free. But some backstory with Maz. Maz has spent pretty much her entire adult life in the front of a camera. She's going to put me on the spot here because she's also been a TV presenter and radio host. Hopefully I'm doing a decent job. Hosting over 3 million shows. She got her big break on MTV as a VJ. I'll have to get her to explain what that means. She spent years on the red carpet hosting awards, globetrotting. She's moved in radio, where she went from the graveyard shift to national drive, Sydney breakfast time slots. She says she's interviewed, and I'm going to ask her about this one too, every celebrity you can pretty much name, and has carved out a really remarkable career. Then on the 1st of January, yes, New Year's Day, 2015, Maz decided to experiment with living alcohol for 31 days and has not had a single drink since, which is just remarkable. So during that experience, though, she said she had an aha moment that ignited a passion to create a platform that helps people redefine their relationship with booze, which I'm really looking forward to talking about today, in order to discover true freedom. Now, her real passion, as she says, is being able to educate people about the real effects of alcohol, to talk about the unspoken shame that comes with drinking alcohol, and being able to equip other people with better coping strategies. So I hope I've done you some justice there. But the thing I do also, look, your book is fascinating. So firstly, congratulations on writing the book.
You nailed that. I mean,
oh my God,
you've smashed that. Thanks. I feel awesome.
Congratulations on the book. You are honestly, I think you are just extraordinary in your approach with having written the book. And I think, you guys, you've got to get this book, because she starts the book with this, hi, my name is, what's that Slim Shady song? Hi, my name is, you're probably a better singer than me, Maz.
No, I cannot sing. That is, in fact, greatest fear is performing in song in front of an audience.
Is that why you got behind the camera instead?
No, it's why I used to drink so much.
Oh, right. So I do want to start with a different conversation other than the alcohol, though, if we can, because
of course.
When I read your book, there was so much in it that was, I mean, honestly, I think I could do an entire series interviewing you, because there was so much in it. But one of the things, the first thing that struck me about you, Maz, and I'm going to go straight to the career part first, right? And I think that does transition into the whole story that we're going to talk about with the booze. But you open up by talking in your backstory about how you manifested your dream jobs. So do you mind, can we start there?
Yeah,
because
of course.
One of the things I'm passionate about is really having people really get an insight into what ignites their passion. And you've talked about that on numerous occasions in your book. So how did that start for you?
I don't know if I refer to it as my superpower, but I think everyone has access to this. I just grew up believing that what I could see, I could become. That's just wired into my psyche for some reason. I just was crazy enough to believe that I could achieve my dreams. And all I had to do was to just keep heading towards the dream, no matter how much rejection, no matter how many no's, no matter how many auditions I went to where they said, sorry, you're not blonde enough, you're not skinny enough, you're not white enough, you're not this enough, you're not that enough, you're too cool. Actually, no one ever said that.
Well, you bring up a great point. In fact, I'm really glad you mentioned that, right? Because I remember the story you talk about in the book about the rejection. I was like, wow, like the handling of rejection that you actually had to deal with. And I think it's important for people to know this, right? Because seriously, people would think, especially given the success you did have in your career within media and where you got to, but that didn't come by, someone gifting you anything. You had some hard slogs and some miraculous stories there.
Yeah, and I think for every promotion I received, every job that I did successfully get, there were probably, 5 to 10 that I was devastated that I didn't get, or that I was turned away from, or that I was told that, were not the right thing for me, or that I wasn't the right thing for them. And it does definitely create resilience within oneself to keep coming up against that thing. And it also sets you on the path that you're meant to be on, which are great positives. But at the time you don't see that because you're just upset and you're just mad and you're just hurt and broken. And I remember I auditioned for this job out of 4,000 candidates, and it came down to 2 people, me and this other person. And I was like, hand on my heart, I was like, this is mine. Like, I've got this. And I got the phone call and they were like, sorry, you didn't get the job. And like, that's like a breakup. That's how my heart felt. Like, my heart felt like my first boyfriend had just dumped me all over again. And so you go through all this, and this is what I've learned. The point of me explaining all this in the book is like, I didn't realize at the time that I was going to be hurt, and then I was going to compound that hurt with something else and then not have a coping strategy for it. So then I would just end up drinking alcohol to not feel pain. I can tell you that now because I've looked back on my life events and those big traumatic milestones that are really evident, and to not be given coping strategy or technique on how to handle emotion in my early 20s just meant I was just fumbling around in the darkness like everybody else. And then I just wound up on TV living this glamorous life. And so and then when I did get that job, the job on MTV, which I had written down in my journal when I was 15, I wrote down, I want to be a TV presenter. I want to communicate to people. I think I wrote, like, the exact wording was like, I want to be a TV presenter and I want to captivate audiences. And I want to be on MTV in Australia. And MTV didn't even exist when I wrote that down, but I'd seen MTV in America. And I was like, well, I can do that. And I ended up doing it. But then when you get the dream job, the pressure, it's like, no one ever told me that. Everyone was like, right, The Secret, thanks Rhonda Byrne, dream it up, write it down, visualize it, put it on your vision board. And then you get your flipping dream and it's terrifying. Because you're like, well, now I need to hold on to this because if I don't have it, I fail. Now my whole identity is wrapped into this job title. And VJ, by the way, is video jockey. VJ? Video jockey. Like a DJ is a disc jockey. Video jockey is what a VJ stood for in the time. I don't think they exist anymore because it doesn't really exist anymore. But then, when you get it, the pressure that you put on yourself to like maintain the dream, and how long is that dream maintainable? When I was 15 and I wrote in my journal I want to be on MTV, at 15 I was like, I'll do that till I'm 110 and I die. But in the reality, you can't be cool and young and awesome on MTV past 30, really. And if you're on MTV after 30, there's questionable reasons as to why you are on a youth music channel in your 30s, right? You don't think of that stuff then. So then as I've been doing the job for 4 years and I'm heading towards the magic number of 30, I'm thinking, I need to come up with a new dream. So we need to recreate that manifestation stuff. So back to The Secret we go, back to the vision board. What are we doing next? And that's kind of how I did it. But that's, I'm not special. That I feel like everyone has access to it. I believed, and I journaled. I had a vision board, several vision boards, and I would like practice interviewing celebrities in my car when I worked in PR at a PR company, because I was obsessed with what I was going to do with my life, and I ended up doing it. But I think it's this beautiful mix of, you've got to be able to see it before you can be it. If you can't even see yourself, like people would say to me when I was on breakfast radio, they'd go, oh my God, I could never, ever get up at 3:37 in the morning to go to work. And I'm like, that is why you are not on breakfast radio.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I do that, and I do it happily and joyfully, because for me, a platform such as this is an absolute privilege. And I don't feel like I've ever taken that for granted, to know when you have a story to share, whatever platform is on, it's a privilege.
Yeah. So, okay, and now I want to kind of understand what happened. So, at some point, I,
Life happened.
well,
It
yeah,
does.
well,
It
something
does.
happened on the was it 1st of January 2015?
Yeah.
So, how do you make a decision that
Yeah.
because so you were obviously so well. It's easy for me to talk about because I've read your book.
Well, yeah, let me explain.
So what was the environment like that for you? So you
Yeah.
ended up at a point where how did you get to that point of creeping in
So
the alcohol?
I talk about 2014 as like because people are like, so wait, so you stopped drinking. So what happened? Like, what was like, when did you hit rock bottom? These are the things that people associate with decisions that involve giving something up.
Totally. Yeah.
So like, yeah, like what was the incident that made you stop drinking alcohol for the rest of your life? Like people talking these really definitive statements, and it wasn't actually like that for me. So 2014, I'd been working in media since 2004 when I got my job on MTV. So it's a decade. And I don't blame industry at all, but industry absolutely facilitated my unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And I didn't realize at the time I was using alcohol to cope with the immense amount of pressure I had put on myself to be Maz Compton for 10 years in front of either a camera or a microphone most of the days of the week for a decade is a lot of pretending everything's okay when sometimes it's not. And during that decade, just to give you some, I guess, perspective on it's not all roses, I went through a divorce. So I went through a divorce, but I got on the radio that afternoon. You know what I mean? So it's like, is everything in my life okay? I don't know, because we're talking about if people prefer peanut butter or Vegemite, because that's the compelling crap you talk about on radio sometimes. But I'm leaving that studio in the afternoon and I'm white as a ghost because I have no energy, because I can't eat a meal because my marriage broke down. And that was 100% mine and my ex-partner's responsibility. People say, so what? How come you got divorced? Like, what happened? I'm like, we both were 100% responsible for that relationship failing. And I'm okay to admit that. So this is just to kind of, I guess, explain that I went through these great highs and these great lows, but I had to kind of remain this like awesome, bubbly, amazing, super relatable, relevant, cool, hip, fashionable chick. And so that takes its toll. And so by 2014, I was drinking alcohol most days. I had to go out a lot for my job, so it was easy to mask it because I was like, I'm out for my job. I'm going to drink some wine. But then I would go home on a Friday after the show and swing by a bottle and buy a bottle of wine or two, if I'm being really honest, and think I'll just have one bottle, not glass, because that was the new normal. So when I was 24, it was like, oh, I'll have one glass of champagne. That's plenty. And by the time you're 34, you're like, oh, I might just have one bottle. not that I set out for it to evolve that way, but that you just get this, you're immune in a way. Like it takes you a lot longer to feel fuzzy.
Oh, absolutely.
And you want to drink to feel fuzzy, to take away the pain of all of the compounded emotional trauma you've been unable to cope with because you don't have good coping strategies. This was my story. So in 2014.
But can I ask you about that, right? Because I think if we were to look back in time, it's easy to look at, there's a couple of ways to look at this, right? And I think it's good for us to kind of come at it from different perspectives, because I think on the one hand, it's easy to look back and reflect about the journey and see what it looks like when we look back at it, right? All that we can describe ourselves. But in the moment, right, of being in that situation, like if that ever had have occurred to you that was going on, do you actually, I mean, like that certainly wouldn't have occurred that way, right?
No, I thought I was fine. I thought I was fine. I thought things were fine. And it wasn't until I asked myself a question, and the question, because I said something out loud to a friend of mine and I heard myself and I went, that sounds like a crazy person.
Right.
I said to her, it's my friend's birthday this weekend and I don't even want to go because I don't want to drink.
Mm.
And I was like, so, okay, don't go. Oh, but I can't not go. Okay, well then just go and don't drink. Oh my God, are you serious? I can't go to my friend's birthday and not have a drink. And this conversation unfolded. And I was like, that is not healthy. And and that is when I started, I guess, thinking about alcohol in my life as a relationship. And then I guess if you want to talk about a catalyst, in September of that year, so this is sort of like all of 2014, this conversation keeps coming up in my head of like, why am I doing this behavior that I don't want to do, but I can't not do? Why are we doing that? Why can't I just stop drinking? And then all the fear would come up like, oh, well, that's career and social suicide at the same time. Like that's ridiculous. I would lose all of my friends. People will judge me. I will be bored. I actually literally thought I would die. Like, how can you live life without drinking? That is the mentality in which I was in. And then the catalyst.
It's also the mentality that people live in, right? I mean, I have confronted it myself, where people go, oh, how could you not drink? Life's too short.
And I think, and this is not a shame show. Like, I'm explaining this because I lived in that thinking that was okay and normal. And what I realize now is that there is another way. Doesn't mean that you have to stop drinking forever. It's just the question I ask everybody is, how is your relationship with alcohol? Because when I looked at it, mine was extremely toxic and unhealthy. So the catalyst, a very good friend of mine passed away very suddenly, and it caught me off guard. And I realized that my default coping mechanism for any level of pain or pressure in my life was to just drink and annihilate myself. And then that is when, after I'd been questioning my behavior for months and months, and then this big event happened, I then really didn't want to let my friend down who had passed away. I was like, what would he be thinking now, looking down upon me, and me being so upset that he's gone and abusing my body? How would he feel about that? And that's kind of when I started to then go to the next line of questioning, which was, so am I an alcoholic? Or I don't feel like an alcoholic. I've still got a job. I don't gamble. I don't know. I had all these weird associations with what an alcoholic was. I Googled it, and according to the definition, I'm not an alcoholic because I didn't feel powerless. I felt very empowered in my choices to drink. And so then that is kind of when I went, I don't feel like I know AA is amazing and I uphold it and uplift it and highly recommend it for people. It just didn't fit well for what I was going through. So I just decided to do an experiment, and I thought, I'm just going to not have any alcohol for a month in my life and see. So I didn't make all these like outrageous definitive statements like, I'm never drinking again. And I was like, I'm just going to not have a drink for 31 days, January 2015. Let's just not have a drink and see how I feel on the 1st of Feb. And I haven't had a drink since.
That's incredible. I mean, it's not one.
No.
Oh, wow.
And it's not a competition with myself.
Remarkable.
It's not a competition with myself. I don't have a token. I don't need a badge of honor. And it's just because the paradigm shifts, the enlightenment, the empowerment that I have felt has so profoundly changed my life. I don't ever want to go back to even the tiniest version of what I felt like, how I felt about myself, and where I was going. I don't want any of that. I want all and more of this and where I'm going. And then I want to share that with other people, because what I know is if it's on the table for me, it's on the table for everyone. It's like the superpower thing. I don't have this magic ability to not drink. I've just made choices every day to not do it. It's actually quite simple. And what you were saying before, like the choice to not drink is actually the easy part. It's the social fallout, the relationships that will naturally come to an end. It's, you know, like starting really weird hobbies to fill in your time at first because you're not really sure what to do with your time. And all those sorts of things are what I felt were the challenging parts.
Yeah. You bring up an interesting point, actually, something that I think it's not just relevant to alcohol, but actually to when we want to make a change of any sort, about the decision-making process. And that I'm reminded, actually, a friend of mine once said, you know, it's habits, you know, we really have this relationship, even to the research, you know, it's 21 days to change a habit. But we had this very interesting conversation with this friend of mine who's been doing this for a long time as well. And, you know, she said, you know, it's actually an illusion. She said, because think about it like when you burn your hand on the stovetop. You know, when you burn your hand, you don't do it again. It hurts so bad that you just go, oh my God, I am never doing that ever again, right? And then you actively make the decision not to do it. It's an easy decision. And so I was thinking, it just kind of made me think about that when you were explaining, you know, how it occurred to you when you remove the alcohol, that it was the same process for you. Like it clearly had such an impact on you never wanting to go back and experience something again, that you made the decision that this was it, right?
Yeah.
So I do want to understand what that specifically looks like for you, because, you know, I think I did have this question as I was reading the book, and especially the reference that you make to feeling free. I think you say freedom and peace, you know, like for you removing those things gave you those things. So I'm curious about the comparison, right? So if taking those things out then has left you with such a marked change where you experience, let's just call it the freedom and peace, then what was it like for you beforehand?
So that is a really big question.
I'm good with those.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So there's a few things I want to mention. So first of all, until I removed alcohol from my life, had no idea how adversely it was affecting me. It was a part of everything I did. It was a part of, I had a good day, I'll drink. I have a bad day, I'll drink. I'm going to a birthday, I'll drink. Someone died, I'm going to drink. I feel I'm running late for work, I'll have a drink when I get there. I'm early for work, I'll have a drink now. Like every part of my life, alcohol had snuck its way into over that industry time. So I had no idea. So I felt like I was crushing it, and I'm probably running at like 60% capacity. Because the alcohol, as you've mentioned, the alcohol, it impairs your performance, it impairs your decision-making ability. It numbs you, it dulls you, it makes you less of you, even though you feel fearless when you have it. So that's part one.
Fearless, right?
You think you feel fearless. That's part one. So tied into that is the acknowledgement that I had been lying to myself about this thing in my life. So I've been drinking thinking, this is what I need because I've had a bad day. This is what I need because I feel sad. This is going to make me feel better. This will take the edge off. I deserve this. And all of that is bullshit. All of those things that I had told myself about alcohol were lies. And it wasn't until I removed the alcohol that I realized how much I had been lying to myself. And then the third part is, once I removed the alcohol, it was like, it wasn't like I've got to just change this habit. I've got to stop the bad habit. I feel like I replaced it with good habits. So I didn't, like when I stopped drinking, I didn't just like not ever have any drinks ever again. I just made them non-alcoholic drinks. And so that was an easier, I guess, ease into the road of not drinking than like, I'm never drinking again. Because when we say statements like that, for me, I know this self-sabotage thing will come in and like kick your butt. The second
That's
you
really
say,
funny you say. That's so
second
funny
you say you're not going to do something, 4
Yeah.
o'clock that afternoon, what are you doing? If you quit sugar, you're eating a flippin' Snickers, aren't you? You know you are. And then you're upset with yourself. And so then you just go, screw it, I'll have a glass of wine as well, because today's gone out the window and I'll start again tomorrow. And that is why we can't even get started on these journeys, is because we have this just weird internal programming that wants to like make us fail. So instead of saying these like really big statements that were scary to say, I said, I'll just not drink for 31 days. And so how do we do that? On the 1st of January, I got up and I said, I'm not going to drink today. And I got to 2 p.m. that day and I went, that's right, I'm not drinking today. And I got to 8 p.m. and I was like, I'm really tired, I'm going to go to bed. And then on the 2nd of January, I woke up and I was like, I'm not going to drink today. And 2 o'clock came and I was like, oh, I haven't had a drink today. Oh, I'll keep doing that. And that is honestly how I did it. And it was during that time that I realized the stuff that I shared earlier about the lies and deceit that I had attached with alcohol, the role that it was playing in my life, which was undermining my every decision. And what I realized really quickly is what I thought was my 100% capacity was my 65. And then I started operating at about 80% capacity. And I was like, well, look out, world. Because if I, on this journey, have this much more creative expression, this much more output, this much more love, patience, kindness, grace for people, compassion, empathy, then I am tapping in. Like, when are we going full throttle? That's the journey that I've been on now.
Yeah, it's incredible that you say that. There's a couple of things that really the part, you don't know what you know until you know, and I do think it's so when you do get present to how great you do feel, I think with not having it, you don't want to go back there. Did you experience any kind of detoxification? I don't know how to call it anything else other than detoxification
like
process.
physically?
Right? Well, physically and mentally, like
yeah. For the first few weeks, I felt really lightheaded, actually, on reflection. And I, because I was still working in media, I was required to go to all of the things and the functions and the parties and the whatever. And I was just going and just having soda water. And that was when I felt really, really uncomfortable.
Wow.
Really like I don't want to be here, but I'm here and I'm not drinking and we're just going to get through this. And the second I can get out that door, I'm ghosting it. Like I definitely felt super uncomfortable in those first few weeks. And then I think I'm just trying to remember, like, definitely in January, like I thought about alcohol a lot because I wasn't drinking it. And then as the journey continued past January, I got my birthday's in March. I was like, oh, maybe I'll just go to March and see. Maybe I'll get through my birthday without a drink. And then maybe we'll get to June, and then it's dry July. So then we're in, then it's October, and then it's Christmas, and I've done a year. That's kind of how that year evolved. And the further along that year I got, the less and less and less I thought about alcohol. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, well, look, let's talk about one of the things I'm curious about. There's two things I'm curious about. One is the comment that you've made about in the book that one of the things that you're passionate about is educating people or having the conversation to educate us around the conversation of shame. Can we talk a bit about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I drank because I felt shame, and then I felt shame because I drank. So it was a shame show for me. And I think, so to explain that a little bit, like there are some significant things that happen in everyone's life. Significant things happen, good and bad. And I think we come at them equally with the heightened and range of emotion, whether it's good or positive or negative. And I'd had a lot of these experiences. I'd had failed job attempts that I told you about, then successful job applications that I've told you about. Then I got married and I got divorced, and then my parents got divorced, and then I moved states like 3 times in 3 years. And so when you add all of that turmoil and stuff into your life, you have these like big emotional events, and I was not taught how to manage that. I just fumbled along and then suppressed the pain in a way. And so the shame of my divorce, I didn't really kind of deal with until years later when I went to a therapist and was really, really honest and was like, hey, I actually feel ashamed that I'm a divorced person at 31. And what does that look like for my future? And have I failed at life? Like, because one person decided they don't love me anymore. Like, all this stuff I felt shame about. And I also didn't feel like I could be honest about. So then I would drink to suppress that. And then I felt ashamed about the fact that I was drinking to suppress the pain. And I couldn't tell anyone about that. So it all, like when it all really kind of unfolded in 2014 and I decided to do this experiment, I rang my mum and I was like, hey, I've got to tell you something and I feel really shameful. And she just was like, whatever, like, you're my baby girl, like nothing you could tell me. She's like, I'm so proud of you. You're so amazing. Like, she just affirmed me in all of the biggest ways. And I was like, Mum, like, I think I have alcohol dependency disorder. And she was like, what? Like, could not. She was literally in the biggest amount of shock because I'd done such a great job of pretending I was okay. So all this shame is like intertwined in our story. And it's,
well,
and then
see, that's interesting that you say that too.
well,
Right?
it was
because,
for me.
I mean, even the
I should say
perspective that
everyone.
she said, but no, the perspective, I think, I think. I'm curious about this, right? Because I think, what it looks like to somebody out there, like especially your mum, we do have rose-colored glasses as parents, let's face it, right?
Yeah.
But I think anyone would say that because on the surface that looks
Yeah.
very normal, and it
True.
is very normal, and your lifestyle. Let's face it. I think in that kind of environment where you're in the uh, in in a space where there's always alcohol and it's just a thing,
It was
of course it
normal.
wouldn't look like it's a problem. That would be
No.
very normal. So
No.
what's happening out here versus the internal struggle, and I think this is the thing that we need to shed a light on, because on the surface we present like life looks like it's normal, but I think it's the internal struggle we have within ourselves,
Totally.
and the conversations that we have with ourselves, that's the problem.
And that is how I got to the question, what is your relationship like with alcohol? Because my relationship with alcohol was really unhealthy, like really terribly unhealthy for a number of reasons. But if we can all ask ourselves that one question, there's only two responses. It's an A or a B. How is your relationship with alcohol? It's awesome. Cool. Then take a month off. Should be a walk in the park. You'll be fine. You won't miss it. If your relationship with alcohol, and I believe you, I believe that you're telling me your truth. If it is in a really healthy space, manageable, balanceable, then you should be able to have a month off, and it's not going to send you haywire. And then if your response is B, which is my relationship with alcohol is not in a good place, then you need to remove that thing from your life, redefine the relationship, and then come back to it. It's like I kind of, the metaphor that I use is in a relationship that's not really necessarily working for both people. Sometimes you take a break. Like, hey, have you broken up? No, we're just on a break. I don't even know what that means. But, people say that. I'm like, so are you seeing other people? No, I'm not seeing anyone else, but I'm not seeing that person that I was seeing. So we're on a break. I'm like, okay. And then at the end of the break, you come together and you have a conversation about, are we putting the band back together with these new boundaries intact to protect ourselves for success? Or are we walking away? And that's what I did with alcohol. And I decided after my 31-day January break, not so much in the moment on the 1st of February, but over the course of that year, that I and alcohol were done, and that I did not need to pursue a relationship with alcohol in any way, shape or form, because it did not serve me. That's my story.
Yeah. So one of the things that you've said that is more available to you since this has happened is the experience of real freedom and peace. What does that look like for you?
I'm just a much better person. Not that I was a pain in the butt.
In your opinion.
I'm just way more awesome now. No, I've always been awesome. No,
well, but see, listen, I think this is really an interesting conversation, Maz, because here's why. Because, well, see, I bring this up this is a pretty consistent coming up theme actually of lately. You know, the iceberg principle, you know, like what we see at the top above the water versus what we see underneath. So mostly people may look at you, even though you've gone through the change, and they go, well, you're still the same Maz to me. You know, you're still the same beautiful, gorgeous person, except
thanks.
It's your experience with yourself. And I think that's got something to be said. I think there's something to be said in that about the impact that alcohol has on our mental state and the conversations that we have with ourselves versus it necessarily being the problematic on, you know, you may not look or feel anything different to anybody else, but it's just, you know.
It's all, so the paradigm shift, I'm trying to think of how to explain. So the paradigm shift for me was redefining my relationship with alcohol. My self-worth was formulated from everyone else telling me how awesome I was. Mm-hmm. And from the jobs that I had, the money that was coming in, and all of the external factors, all of those things that were presented to me in my life that I worked for, that I can take credit for really proudly and say I worked my butt off and I had an amazing career. But all those external factors fed back into me, and that is how I created my belief system about myself.
Yeah.
And then I took alcohol out of my life, and it's the reverse. I now dictate my experience of myself from within. So I don't need any of that stuff anymore. And if it's there, great.
So
I'll take it.
You a question?
But I don't need it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I completely recreated because I was thinking actually, ironically, excuse me, before I was driving in here tonight, actually was thinking about our conversation and the parallel, even for myself, the thing that I've noticed a lot, you know, like I spent most of my life, you know, really giving much like that, right? My worth was given to how much of a difference or how pleasant or how much I pleased other people.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, and it's only been, you know, the last few years. And of course, there's been times where it's not been that case all the time, but it's only really been of late where even, you know, it's even now I have to really pay attention to making sure I'm not, I have developed the habit over the years of putting my attention over there on what I think is going to make other people happy. And then I do that. But then what I hadn't realized was just how much I was sacrificing of my own self in that game. And it's just interesting that you say that, because ironically, the timing that I came off alcohol is actually quite the same. So it was when all of those things came out, and I was no longer getting satisfaction or, you know, validation, you know, nor surviving in a world where there was all this, you know, but all of a sudden now when there's nothing, all you got is yourself. And yet, there's that journey, that transition's not necessarily, well, it's not easy, which is weird in itself, but
it's
all of a
true.
sudden,
and even the language that we use of like, all you've got is yourself, but you are all you need to be. You are actually enough. And it's not until you remove the stuff that you've been trying to justify who you are, or, you know, showing up to be the person on the business card that you need to be. When you remove all the stuff that you've been using to facilitate all of that.
Well, to facilitate the validation, I think that's what I want to bring attention to there, Maz, is actually what's occurring there is the facilitation of validation. Now, this is perfect given the current climate, because one of the things that I've noticed, especially during this time, and I've been on a rampage about trying to cause a crisis in your life in order to get rid of the shit that's actually not validating you when you think it is, right? Now,
the universe just did that for everyone.
Well, exactly right. So for me, when this happened, even though, you know, my business literally got wiped out overnight, right? Like, because I, you know, training and development, it
Yeah,
literally, all companies stopped spending money. Now I lost all my income and literally the business is starting from scratch, but it didn't hit me mentally. And the reason that I know it didn't is because it's already been 5 years for me where I went through the grief or the detox. It's the detoxification of the addiction. Let's just call it, we're addicted to validation from things that we think give us satisfaction. We take it
totally.
out of existence. We deal with, like, I remember when I first went through this, I sold my I even started reading all the books about taking stuff out of your life, you know, like stripping things back out. And
Oh,
what I
yeah.
took, I sold my car, like uh, I just stopped. First, so I got rid of all my clothes. I got rid of the Audi Q7, and I
But I
got
think
myself a damn down Toyota. And
but it does, this is such an important thing, because you, like, somebody listening might be like, okay, I think I'm going to redefine my relationship with alcohol and take alcohol out of the equation. And what will happen is it will then have this cascade effect on every single area of your life, unintentionally. That I didn't set out to end up having a capsule wardrobe, but what happens is you start to realize, like, all the lies you told yourself about alcohol, then all the lies that you're getting fed on social media. So I shut down my Instagram. I, like, totally quit that. And then I was like, oh, now there's more room in my head for my brain to actually do what it's supposed to do, which is to create and think and explore and write. And so that, you know, then I wrote a book. And so it's like this complete flow on everything. Like, get rid of the loans, get rid of the junk, get rid of the crap, stop watching that show, stop having coffee with her, she's a bitch. Like, you just get real with yourself. And then I kind of got a bit brutal with myself, and I was like, well, I'm going to be hardcore about trying to be, not trying, no, I'm just going to get hardcore about being awesome. That's across all platforms. It's across every single area of my life, as a wife, a mum, as a colleague, as an interviewee. Whatever I'm doing, I'm coming at 110%, and out of a place of excellence. And so my filter, I call it the threshold of excellence. That's my filter on life now. And I only got to that place because I removed the one that was, like, poisoning my brain, basically.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect I think that's really a unique opportunity in itself, is like to take the attention off trying to come off it because it's something that is not good or for what it does, but actually the opportunity of discovering actually what's available.
Yeah, and that's
You
the
know,
mind shift there. So
yeah.
and I think I use this analogy in the book where I say how, like, I have over the years been like a serial dieter, and I've done like every freaking fad diet ever. And I've always exercised, and up until about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, my driver for exercise and eating what I thought was healthy dieting was because I did not want to be fat. Like, that was my driver, and that is running away from something. So there's fat and there's me running away from it as fast as I can on that treadmill. And then my shift came, and so I still exercise a lot and I still eat really healthy food, but my driver now is to be the healthiest version of myself. So I can be on this planet for a really long time, empowering people. That's running towards
You know what's
something.
really fascinating about that, Maz? You know at the beginning how we were talking about manifesting your dreams, like how that's just been the way you are. The interesting thing about what you've just raised is in the neuroscience of the brain, right? There's three different drive. Well, there's four, but one of the three, which you're now referring to, is the brain's need to either seek pleasure or avoid pain. Right.
Right.
So
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that part, ironically, is when talking about creating a vision that builds resilience, it is scientifically proven to be more effective actually if you are creating a vision that has you anchored on a seeking pleasure than it is on
Of
avoiding a pain.
pain.
But here's the paradox. It's often the trigger for people to take the action is often the pain that comes from avoiding the pain itself, right?
That makes so much sense.
Don't ever want to experience that again. Like, I mean, I think back to when I had my first really bad drunken experience when I was 18, right? I was so sick. I remember vomiting in my mother's bathroom. It's just so horrible. And I made a decision. I was like, I so don't ever want to feel like that again, you know? And it made a mark on me forever, right? But for sustainable change, and one that really kind of, I think, accelerated, like one of the things I talk about a lot is accelerating performance or accelerating growth. But accelerating growth in the space where there's no growth can only happen when you are anchored towards a future, like what you were even saying when we talk about that dream you manifested, right? When you were obsessed by that, causing that future, obsessed, which is what, you know, you also reminded me of athletes, you know, like they're obsessive over there, you know, like Michael Jordan. Have you watched the documentary recently on Michael Jordan?
Yeah, The Last Dance.
You look at that guy, he's like obsessed, just obsessed. And I'm like, that's like you with
you
your
don't wake
career
up a
and
world
dreams.
champion,
Like,
you know, like you don't just wake up in those positions one day all of a sudden and go, oh wow, I'm like the best basketballer in the world. What a surprise. You know, like you get there and you're like, no one has any idea what I have done to get here. And so I want to stay here. That's, you know, but it is interesting because people do look at those people and like, oh my God, they're so amazing. And people used to say it to me, like, oh my God, you're so lucky you work in radio. I'm like, really? Do you want to sit down and hear the long story? Because luck has very little to do with.
Yes. Oh, I loved your comment about that in your book. It was so great. So I've got two more questions that I want to ask you before we jump off.
So we're going to be here for another 3 hours.
Oh, I know. I don't even know the time because typically when we do these, you know, like I record it, it's like it tells me the time, but unfortunately
it's great. It's great.
But anyway, too bad because I got two more questions we want to ask. The first one is, now I've forgotten. See, I'm free to be stupid. That's the great thing about
amazing.
Anyway, no, the first one is it's Dry July, right? It is now Dry July, and therefore it's a big campaign about people going out and going off alcohol for campaign raising stuff. Great. But I just want to hear from you, from your perspective, if somebody is saying, okay, well, I have thought about it, but I've just not done it. What do you think are some of the things to consider or put in place if you are going to get started? What do you suggest to people to do?
Well, it depends on your motivation. If you want to, like, Dry July is an awesome campaign. I've been an ambassador for so many years. And it's a great way to communicate to your community that you are taking a month off alcohol for an awesome cause. It's to raise money so that we can help adults living with cancer. You know, that's what all that money from Dry July that you raise by not drinking, your people sponsoring you and all of the things, all that money goes to a whole bunch of charities, and it's all about helping adults live with cancer, which I think is an amazing cause. So there's cause-driven stuff. And also, you know, the flip side is you get to spend a month of your life not drinking alcohol, which is a healthy thing, I think, for everyone in their adult life to do once in a while, if not a lot. So there's that. There's also Hello Sunday Morning is another really great platform that you can go to where you you take a vow, I suppose, and they have really amazing facilitators and online helpers, and you can journal your way through it. And so Hello Sunday Morning is another one. So I guess what I'm getting at is support is a really big factor. And you probably are not going to get support from the people that you go drinking with at the pub. Just a fair warning. My colleagues who I used to work with were not stoked when I decided that I was not going to drink. Yes. And one of my bosses actually said to me, you're so boring. Let's hang out when you've changed your mind. And this was like someone who I really looked up to, and I had to take that one on the chin and go, I guess we're not going to be hanging out for a while then. Because the other bit of advice I would give is be really sold on your decision. Like, I at first apologized for not drinking. So like, I'd be like, someone would offer me a drink and I go, oh no, I'm really sorry, I'm not drinking. So I had to change my language about my choice, because at the end of the day, this is your choice. Now, whether you believe Tristan got you drunk at the pub or not, the reality is you got yourself drunk at the pub. He was just maybe there buying the rounds, but every drink you've ever had has been your choice. So when you start to think about that, you're actively choosing this behavior. You can actively not choose it then. Like, it's really simple. It's just behavioral choice. So you got to put yourself in an environment that's going to set you up for a win and not make you regret that decision. So finding support networks that are going to help you along the way. And also, I think too, again, this is just for me, and what worked for me is not saying things like, oh my God, I can never drink again. Because you can. I could, after this, go and pour a glass of wine and be completely okay with it, because it would be my empowered choice. But I don't want to choose that. And so if you can not make really like hectic and scary definitive statements about your forever future, and if you can just really bring it back to the next few days or weeks or a month, that's a really manageable amount of life to have a plan for. And then see how you feel, and you probably feel really good. And then you might re-establish, and then reassess. Like, get to the little end of that road. How do you feel? Reassess. Keep going if you want. Redefine it if you want. Put some boundaries down if you want.
I love that. Give it a go. Get support, and then reassess.
Support's a really big one. And
look, I think I like your idea about having the platforms and the thing like Dry July, because it does help people. It gives people a way to deal with not having to deal with the conversation of social, because you can say, oh, I'm doing Dry July, and all of a sudden they go, oh, okay, no problem. But if you had no excuse, it's like,
it's
tough. You're boring.
Yeah. But also, and I journeyed through that too. Like I said, at first I was apologizing to people for not drinking. And then I had to change my language and be like, I'm not sorry that I'm not drinking. I'm sorry that you're drinking and that you're pissed off at me for not drinking. Let's have that conversation, And so, not that I was super confrontational, because that is not me at all, like, not a fan of confrontation, but it did come up sometimes when, in those early days. And then the other thing that happens is that you rearrange your whole outlook on social interaction anyway, because when you're taking alcohol off the table, certain relationships just fizzle away. And then what you notice is you get tired earlier and you wake up earlier. And then so you start, like, my favorite thing is brunch. It used to be tequila shots. I mean, you don't do those at 10 a.m. Well, not anymore. So my whole life shifted, where like the morning is like my heaven. Get up early, take my son for a walk, like. And even before I had a baby, I would just like get up and go down to the beach and have an ocean swim and just surround myself in nature. So my life got full of all these amazing things that are readily available that I had blocked out of my life because drinking had become the most important priority.
Right. Okay, great. Now my last question is going back to the vision and the obsession. So, and I think there's two ways I want to look at this one. One is, was there something else that you obsessed about as a new future that had you so mobilized to feeling great that you didn't do it? Or secondly, firstly, let's ask that one. Was there something else pulling you towards was there something else that you wanted to feel better about, achieve, that got you into gear?
In relation to not drinking, I think the biggest thing was, I don't like feeling this way.
Right. Okay.
Like, I do not like feeling anxious a lot. I don't like having panic attacks at night. I don't like waking up in the morning and not knowing how I got home. I don't like what some of my relationships are founded on. I don't trust myself or my decisions when I choose this behavior. I don't like this. but I am making choices to put myself in this position. That has to change. And the only person that can change you is you. And I knew that. So then I had to go to work and figure it out. And it really was me just trying to figure it out for myself. And then when I kind of got to this sweet spot of, I don't have panic attacks anymore, I don't have anxiety anymore, I like who I am, I'm enjoying the life I'm creating for myself, I'm proud of the work that I'm doing, I have so much energy and creativity bursting out of my body, it's ridiculous. And I'm now obsessing over feeling this good all the time. Now, if I can feel that, I want everyone to feel that. So how do we then share that? And that's what, that's how the social rebellion came about.
Yeah, love it. Okay, well then that leads to the final part of that question was, what's the new thing you're obsessive about? What's the thing what's the dream you're manifesting now, Maz?
Telling my story and being, you know, sharing this story was a conscious decision, but not one that I came to readily, because it's big. It's like transparent, raw, honest. This is the real deal. Like, this is me, and sharing all of the brokenness. And so I'm sitting in that, and I'm comfortable in that vulnerability. And if that can help someone make a great choice for their life, then that is what I've been put on the planet to do. And that's really all that matters now. That I feel like I have found my purpose throughout, not just the media and the fame, and then the you know, then the not drinking, and then the writing of the book. Like, it's not that clerical. It's this conscious choice to want to share my experience with others, because I genuinely want them to know that if you're not feeling awesome about yourself, it is available, it is on the table, it is there. And now that you know better, you can do better, because that's all I've done, is I just found out better and then chose better.
So is there any particular area where you're most passionate about that? I mean, you've made a mention about women in particular. Is it mostly women? Is it just people in general? Is it youth, or is there any area?
I definitely think one of the heaviest drinking demographics in Australia is women, 36 to 59. And they are my people. I am their story, and my story is not unique. I used to think that I was a unique snowflake. And then I wrote this book, and I had all these people get in contact with me like, oh my God, I like resonate with your story. I'm like, I thought my story was unique to me, but it turns out everyone's having a shame show. So I feel like that is the natural place for my story to be shared, but it's not exclusive. You know what? It's like, I have a humanistic approach to it all.
Don't you think that's another paradox? Don't you think that's an absolutely beautiful paradox too, about
how I thought I was
finally
special.
discover how.
And I'm like, oh shit, everyone's going through this crap.
But that paradox, right, of discovering at the same time you go, oh, I'm not that special, and at the same time you go, oh, I'm so awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's a weird one.
Yeah. Listen, thank you so much for joining me today, and congratulations really on, I know, you know, for you it was never kind of like, I'm never going to do that again, but I mean 6 years is remarkable considering the environment and the work environment that you had, and that change. Like, that's a really marked change. And I am going to encourage everybody. I mean, there's so many lessons and things that we've talked about today. I think in being able to do that and the benefit, I think the one that stands out for me the most, Maz, well, two things stand out for me the most. Just that real beautiful conversation around being obsessive about something that you really truly want, and the final part, which is really related, is actually finding that thing that makes you feel really great. I think the opportunity of discovering that which you don't know yet, because you've never really allowed yourself to fully experience what's really great. And I think it's like we try to, you know, you have it, whether it's alcohol or drugs or anything, that, you know, it makes us feel better, which takes us away from feeling any pain or loneliness, etc. But the irony of it is it's completely the opposite on the other end.
Yeah.
And which I think is a really beautiful message.
Thank you. I definitely feel like sometimes you might feel like you're sitting in the dark and then the light goes on, but you wouldn't acknowledge the light if you weren't in the dark. And so that's why, like, the whole journey is important. Like, no matter where you are on that journey, every part of it's relevant, because you can't have the darkness without the light, and vice versa. And so, and I just share that to encourage anyone who is in a dark place. There is hope and there is light, and you can acknowledge the hope and light because you're in the darkness now. And if you can take some steps to move towards that lightness, then that's a really great choice.
Yeah. Well, in fact, I think there's a couple of statements in there, really. The one is, this time does pass and it's not easy. And taking it out of your diet is not easy. Like any addiction, it's not easy. Don't expect it to be great. Allow yourself, it's like when you detox, right? Give yourself the space to know it's going to be pretty shit for a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And then the last one is
fine.
just one step towards the future. And I think you said this at the beginning, like just putting one foot in front of the other. In fact, I really did love what you said about just on that particular day, you'd wake up and you say, well, I'm not drinking today. And then you get to that time in the day. It was like just that focus right in front, what's right in front of you.
Yeah, it's one choice every day.
Yeah.
And then you just consistently make it. And I know that sounds overly simplistic, but really,
no, but it is, right?
That's all life is. Like, your life is the sum total of all of your choices. So make good ones.
Oh my God. We could create a book of quotes out of this story.
I've always wanted to be on a t-shirt. So that's my motivation, actually. That's what I'm obsessed about. I need to be quoted on a t-shirt. No, I'm kidding.
Good. We'll get you back on the show when you've got the shirt ready. Thanks again for joining me, Maz. I'm going to put all the details about the book in the show notes. And congratulations on your son, and all the best with your studies and the obsessive in the future.
It's so nice to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks.